Okay, so apparently Shadowlands abilities are not usable outside of Shadowlands content. Relic of the Past items are not craftable at all in the pre-patch. Potency conduits have been nerfed from 3 down to 2. Activision Blizzard closed down one of their major offices in France. Restoring mana, whatever. Restoring mana from drinking now starts out slow and then gets faster. Dude, Bob, this is nuts.
Is it, or is it by Master Plan? Fweh, 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 fweh.
Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to The Old View, or welcome back to Warcraft Weekly, the show that's all about polite discourse and criticism of the world of Warcraft.
But not today. No, today is a bitch fest, with the first beta build after the Shadowlands delay unloading one controversial change after another, spelling the doom of the expansion and jeopardizing the future of World of Warcraft itself.
But first, a hearty hello to our Brutosaur party over on Twitch and the awesome patrons. And Julie. Thanks, Julie. And thanks all of you for joining me, and let the carnage begin, because there's a lot to cover, and not just all of it is as bad as you think, because in some cases it's worse. This is gonna be so exciting. In some brief WoW Classic news, the PTR for Phase 6 is now up. Phase 6 will introduce Naxxramas, the final and most difficult raid introduced in vanilla, and then it was retuned for Wrath of the Lich King, and then it's gonna be recreated again in a WoW Classic. It's anyone's guess how many minutes it's going to take for top guilds to clear this final raid, and I can't help but look to the future. If and when Burning Crusade Classic becomes a thing. Depending on how it's released, for example, a separate BC server is made, what would that do to split the Classic population? How long until everyone left behind in a Classic Vanilla has like one or more characters in full T6 gear, or will those realms be left as desolate husks? Discussion among fans is ongoing, and Blizzard hasn't given a peep on what they're going to do. Personally, I think it's best to have a separate BC server and then have a one-time transfer, not a character copy, but a one-time transfer of your vanilla character over to BC. That way, 2 versions of Classic can continue to persist. Now, there are disadvantages, like leaving vanilla behind, and you don't want to make a new character again, but something about copying a character just doesn't sit right with me. Reported by Bloomberg, Activision Blizzard announced that it would close its offices in Versailles, France. A significant closure, as the location has been around since Blizzard's days under former owner Vivendi. It's a lengthy follow-up from the large Activision Blizzard layoff from the previous year that pummeled the office, and it's uncertain if jobs will be outright lost, relocated, or made remote indefinitely. The move comes at an awkward time for Blizzard, as any move that they make is over-scrutinized and usually painted with the usual narrative, something Bobby Kotick. But it's also 2020, and in light of a global pandemic, companies like Activision Blizzard, which can operate to a certain capacity remotely, have likely assessed the costs of having multiple offices to, whatever cost-saving tactics they can get away with, optics be damned. This is by no means an isolated incident, as the world adapts to being a place where camaraderie is enjoyed at a distance. Regardless, I think we all have it in us to show some empathy to everyone who's affected, and if you're already wondering, it's probably going to be a few years until Dreamhaven starts looking to fill positions related to those that could be lost in France, but don't let me stop ya. This week marks the end of Biffa, alongside the ongoing development of Shadowlands, but the relief of a new patch might be marred by some confusion, some anger, but definitely some questionable changes that we'll go over today. It feels almost intentional that this week Blizzard decided to unleash one change after another that has some fans and critics contorting in their seats like, what? Even I, who normally try to look at design decisions with a more balanced viewpoint, and I'm just kind of standing inside like, okay, hey, you guys want to do some bitching? Okay, right this way, don't let me get in your way. It's almost as if Ian threw on some bondage gear, strapped himself down, and called out to all of us, all right, daddy, give it to me good. I might have a graphic picture on the side here, but I might not because I care about you. This is the last week of BFA, one of WoW's more polarizing expansions that pit factions against one another, lore buffs against one another, players versus devs, and a big old B mount, which is, kind of cool, but it's alliance only because, faction bias. We have the patch notes, and a link to the official release is going to be linked below, but here are some new items to add that I can't help but comment on. There's a sale on character services. Good thing, cool. The black market now requires max level in order to access, and I think this is overall good. What's been happening is that the whales of WoW have been using guild transfers to move massive quantities of gold for all sorts of reasons, including buying up black market auction items. The change is meant to curb behavior that can directly affect other players. I mean, it sort of sucks, right? If you are bidding for that one tier 3 piece on your low pop server, but all of a sudden it gets swept up by some rich nobody. Of course, all this does is add friction, requiring those same players to have a max level character, and they would need to use twice as many character transfers to move gold if they just want to use one character. So basically, this is just like taxing the 1% for profit in Blizzard's pockets and all that. And well, go ahead and take that thought to the forums. Restoring mana from food and drink has had an overall nerf. When you drink, mana is restored slowly at first, and then it ramps up after a few seconds. I'm going to call this very inconvenient for situations where those first few seconds are critical, namely during arena fights, as now the impact of food has been curbed a good deal. But this is also the kind of feature that if it was always there, then, well, no one would have complained. On to my favorite thing, glyphs that influence druid forms have changed their functionality. Now when they're used, they permanently unlock the appearance in the barbershop. It's great for druids, great for me in the short term, but long term, not so much. And I'm talking about glyph sales. So Glyph of Stars, your days are numbered, but I thank you for your service. The Relic of the Past, used to upgrade your pitiful bronze axe into a death-dealing weapon, has been changed in such a way that they're no longer even really accessible during the pre-patch. Now, crafting a Relic of the Past requires a luminous flux, an item that can't be obtained outside of Shadowlands zones, and each level of the relic requires an increasing number of this flux. The change all but kills the opportunity of using cheap materials to make items that can be vendored, also known as a shuffle, that can create massive amounts of gold and would otherwise break the gold economy, so that part makes it a good change. But in my own previous coverage of this Relic of the Past, I found this to be a cool and exciting way to prepare your characters for Shadowlands content. And frankly, I'm not very fond of the change because it alters the meaning of these items. To be fair, the Relic of the Past is a very strange item because someone who is leveling could theoretically just make the same item multiple times while leveling, just adding a new Relic of the Past level each time. So it makes higher skill weapons feel basically meaningless. But overall, I'm not too happy about needing this reagent that would require me to get onto a Shadowlands-based character to fetch the reagent or to make that relic thing and then send it to an alt. It's kind of confusing, it's definitely messy, and I think it could have been handled a little bit better. Now let's finally move on to Shadowlands, which is delayed until later this year as Blizzard polishes up a few messy bits like the Maw and Torghast, and maybe they're sort of creating a few more messes. Now this is the problem with public betas. I mean, it's cool when we can step back and see a bit of transparency, the whole process of where it started to where things ended up, thanks to discussion and discourse and feedback and then reiteration. But when it's immediately happening, it's hard to not just react, often strongly, to decisions that are more than likely going to end up looking different in the end. Take for example Soulbind, specifically the number of potency conduits that started off with 2 and then became 3, and now it became 2 again. And to be honest, I'm glad that they changed it back. Ultimately, choosing a Soulbind meant making choices among 4 conduit slots, and previously, 3 of those 4 could be dedicated to throughput, which made it logical to go for throughput in the majority of builds. With a maximum of 2 potency slots, this leaves much more room for interesting builds that offer a bit more utility, without the feeling that you're sacrificing DPS because you're losing some DPS anyway. Is this the best call though? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is the final call either, but again, I'm just making an example of how, over time, design decisions change as development continues. Just because a change made it to the public beta does not mean that it's the best for the game, or is it the final decision. Here's another example that thankfully has a happy ending. A move in this week's beta that I had found to be at first, in so few words, horrifying. In this current build, Covenant class and signature abilities will not work outside of Shadowlands content, imitating the behavior of the Heart of Azeroth and essences that will not function outside of BFA and all the other previous expansion content. Meanwhile, Soulbinds and Soulbind perks still seem to partially function. However, Soulbind traits like Combat Meditation, which relies on Covenant abilities to even fire off, are virtually broken because of this change. The conduit that influences your Covenant ability, that's also broken. Taking this at face value, disabling these abilities outside of Shadowlands content is what's been done in Legion and BFA, like I talked about with artifact weapons and the Heart of Azeroth and so on and so forth, only this time it's supposed to not feel as bad somehow. That was at least my headcanon, until later, on the same day, Blizzard announced that this change would be reverted. So congratulations, Blizzard, you successfully made us feel better about another round of expansion features that's going to be gone in a few short years because you teased us with something that is arguably probably worse. This worry over Covenant abilities was brief, but it was like pouring gasoline on one of the ongoing debates over WoW's game design, the notion of borrowed power. Many critics, including myself, are not fond of this design where great power is bestowed upon us and then taken away. In Blizzard's statement, they also acknowledge, and I quote, "When that time comes, it won't feel great to lose something that will have come to feel like a part of your character." And they noted how awkward it would make legacy content feel too. My mind hasn't changed one bit on the matter, and I'm going to keep advocating for features that can continue to be enjoyed for veterans who played through an expansion before, as well as newcomers who missed out. And here are some examples of Evergreen Systems, both power and non-power related, that I hope are easy to understand. Imagine talent rows that expand every expansion horizontally instead of vertically. That way we get more options that come from previous content, but ultimately we keep the same number of choices to avoid bloat. But if that's too restrictive, how about we borrow a little bit from the current PvP talent system, where you have a set number of choices, but you can freely choose from a long list of talents so you can make up your own synergies. Now, you bet there's still going to be an optimal build, but that's nothing new. The point is to allow players outside of that to customize their playstyle however they like. And then of course there's player housing, the probably overbloated feature that spans across WoW's past, present, and future, giving players the opportunity to express themselves well beyond an achievement score or the cosmetics that they're immediately wearing, while supercharging legacy content and professions and giving these sorts of players a ton of things to craft and farm for when the raids are done. But I'd be remiss if I didn't at least try to appreciate what Blizzard does with expansion features to keep me from feeling bored. And let me make it clear that I'm just speaking for me, alright? If we're going all in with some of the classics like set bonuses, expanding talent trees, and reforging, like if that was how things just worked in Legion and BFA and in Shadowlands, and there were no expansion features, we'd probably have a perfectly competent expansion with the usual ups and downs with tuning and balance, but it would just work. It would be a working formula each and every time. You level up, you farm for the best in slot, you fight for the set bonuses because that's really the only place where the cool stuff can go, and then you camp spawns for mounts. And then you repeat each season because, new gear brings new set bonuses and so on and so forth. I'm obviously oversimplifying here, but what I described is just fine. And a good chunk of you folks at home and on the loo would prefer that over the exhaustion of having to learn system after system on top of class changes, on top of reprogramming your weak auras, relearning fights, and so on. Because you just want to play the game. I've heard it before. I hear ya. But if WoW remained as simple and formulaic as it was, I can say with great confidence that I would eventually quit. The foundations of my motivations in WoW haven't changed. I level up, I get the gear, I get the power, and I complete the challenges that I set for myself. That's me in a nutshell. But I know that I would get bored of doing the same thing in the same old way, season after season, expansion after expansion. Expansion features are a hit or miss, but if nothing else, they are an attempt to spice things up and keep things fresh. This approach has absolutely turned players off, and it also irks me because in a few days we're basically going back to patch 8.2, but it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me interested in what's new and excited over what to look forward to. And despite everything you might have seen and read, systems on top of systems being the favorite remark, you've also got to understand that this is the most exposed alpha and beta that we've seen, and we've been on a 6-month journey diving into unfinished concepts and trying to understand them before the next build, and then we have to understand them all over again. So we shouldn't be surprised if we're left confused or overwhelmed at times. It's dolled up, but it's the same. Level up. Choose the covenant that you think is best for you, and then go down one of two paths, or, both, whatever. If you want the gear and the power, dive into dungeons and PvP and raids, whenever those come out. Get the gear, get the conduits and legendaries to build some synergy bonuses. If you want to immerse yourself into the world, though, dive into world content. Farm the anima, rebuild the covenant, and enjoy the, kind of meaningful gear upgrades and the activities. It's the same stuff, it's just dressed differently, and it tries to pay respects and reward the different paths to endgame, because outside of a few exceptions, we are worlds away from the old raid or die mentality. Stability is important, but change can be interesting. I was confident that BFA would be a good expansion, and it was just okay. On the other hand, I'm confident that Shadowlands will be a good expansion, and when you just dive into it, you might find that it's much more simple than any article or guide or video could even explain to you. All that said though, I still want player housing, right? You feel me? Okay, cool. And that's the show. So this is it, folks. The long wait is nearly over, which is funny because technically this is not even close to the longest content drought that we've had in a while, but boy, 2020 sure made it feel long. I didn't want to dive too deep into the speculation, but some folks have been speculating that the current sale on character services that ends on November 15th on a Sunday is an indicator that the expansion could make its worldwide launch starting on the 16th or the 17th, depending on where you live. What's sort of suspicious is that this sale is going to last for over a month, longer than any sale that my crappy memory can recall. If you remember my speculation from last week, this date fits. We have the room to enjoy the expansion for a few weeks, including the Thanksgiving break. Season 1 will start on the 1st of December, and the race to World First is over probably by Christmas. It should be, right? My only gripe against this is that, well, even as an estimate, a 3-week delay from October 27th to November 17th it almost feels like it's close enough that John Haidt could have or should have said, hey, you know what, we're sorry, we're delaying it to the 17th. Sorry about your schedules, but there we go. So for now, I'm going to take this prediction with a grain of salt. The 17th is the earliest of my predictions, and there's still December. The open delay gives Blizzard an opportunity to breathe a bit, and I think they should take full advantage of it. Enough of all that though, the patch is coming, and I'm really tempted to sport that shorter Blood Elf haircut and put an end to all that long hair clipping all the frickin' time. What are you looking forward to the most in the pre-patch, knowing that the invasion stuff won't be happening quite yet? Share your thoughts on that and anything else you feel like in the comment below. Like the video if you enjoyed yourself, subscribe, and do that notification thing for some upcoming guides and all things Warcraft. And then follow me over on Twitch, yada yada yada, and let's just get out of here. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we will see you in patch 9.0. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.